It was a cool autumn night, and the wind was howling through the trees as a group of friends sat in the local diner, sipping coffee and chatting. As the night wore on, they found themselves getting restless and bored with their mundane routines. One of them suggested an adventure, a thrill-seeking experience that would be the highlight of their lives. The idea was to explore an abandoned asylum on the outskirts of the town. The mere thought of venturing into a haunted asylum sent shivers down their spines, but they were all game for a thrilling adventure. They quickly made their way to the asylum, their hearts pounding with anticipation. The asylum was a towering structure with barred windows and a rusted gate. The gate creaked open, and they made their way inside. The asylum was abandoned, with walls covered in peeling paint, broken windows, and debris strewn about. They split up into groups, with each group exploring a different part of the building. The air was stale and damp, and the silence was deafening. As they made their way through the corridors, they started hearing strange noises. Footsteps echoed through the halls, and whispers seemed to be coming from the shadows. The hairs on the back of their necks stood on end as they felt a cold presence following them wherever they went. The first sign of paranormal activity came when they stumbled upon a room that had been boarded up. Despite their best efforts to pry the boards loose, they couldn't seem to get in. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the hallway, and they heard a voice whisper, "Leave now." Shaken, they regrouped and decided to leave. But as they made their way back to the entrance, they found themselves trapped. The door was locked, and there seemed to be no way out. Panic set in as they heard the sounds of screaming and banging coming from different parts of the building. It seemed as if the spirits of the patients were trying to communicate with them. They tried to break down the door, but to no avail. Just as they were about to give up hope, a strange figure appeared before them. It was a ghostly apparition, dressed in white, with a face that seemed to be contorted in agony. It gestured for them to follow, and they found themselves being led through a maze of corridors and rooms. The rooms were dark, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. Strange symbols were etched into the walls, and the sound of moaning filled the air. As they walked deeper into the asylum, the apparition seemed to grow more and more agitated. It was as if they were getting closer to the source of the supernatural activity. Finally, they emerged into a large room, lit by candles that flickered in the darkness. In the center of the room was a chair, and sitting in the chair was a figure that was barely recognizable as human. It was a patient of the asylum, their skin rotting, their eyes glazed over with madness. They started to approach the figure, but suddenly, the candles went out, plunging them into total darkness. In the darkness, they could hear the sound of footsteps approaching them, and the sensation of a cold breath on their necks. The spirits of the patients were all around them, and they could hear their screams and moans. The air was thick with the smell of death and decay, and they could feel the presence of the supernatural all around them. Suddenly, a voice spoke to them in a deep, gravelly voice. "You should not have come here," it said. "You have disturbed the spirits of the dead, and now you must face their wrath." Panic set in as they tried to make their way out of the room, but the spirits seemed to be closing in on them. They could hear the sound of bones rattling and the shuffling of feet, and the air grew colder and thicker. The darkness seemed to envelop them, and they felt as if they were being swallowed whole. As they stumbled through the darkness, they could hear the sound of something dragging behind them. They turned around and saw a ghostly figure dragging a chain behind it, its eyes glowing with a malevolent energy. The figure let out a blood-curdling scream, and the friends ran as fast as they could in the opposite direction. They found themselves back in the main corridor, but it was different now. The walls were covered in strange symbols and eerie images, and the air was filled with the scent of burning sulfur. They could hear the sound of chanting coming from one of the rooms, and they cautiously approached it. Inside the room, they saw a group of robed figures gathered around a strange altar, chanting in an ancient language. The figures turned to face them, and the friends could see that their eyes were completely black, devoid of any emotion or humanity. One of the figures stepped forward and raised its arms, and suddenly, the friends felt a surge of energy coursing through their bodies. They felt as if their very souls were being drained out of them, and they knew that they had to get out of there. They ran back through the asylum, dodging the ghosts and spirits that seemed to be following them. As they neared the exit, they saw the figure in white again, beckoning them to follow. They ran towards it, and suddenly, the world around them dissolved into darkness. When they came to, they were outside the asylum, standing in the cold night air. They looked back at the building, and saw that it was glowing with an eerie energy. They knew that they had been changed by their experience, and that they would never be the same again. As they made their way back to their homes, they could feel the weight of the spirits of the asylum still clinging to them. They knew that they would carry the memory of that night with them for the rest of their lives, and that they would never forget the terror that they had faced in the abandoned asylum.